Hello everybody, we're continuing with the Italian openings, and today I want to present you an opening that is probably the most annoying for beginners. It's called FIDE lever attack. So how does it begin? It appears after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, which I like so much for all kinds of beginner and medium levels. And then they go with three knights opening, knight f6. People like and tend to play like this because it's good, it's reliable opening, by the way, it's good for black, and they just keep on developing their pieces. You know the old rule by, I believe Lasker said that, or Steinitz, first develop your knights, then develop bishops. So according to all basic rules, knight f6 looks so good. But here we go. The most problematic move for black players, especially in, like those for beginners on lower levels, is knight g5. I simply know that because I once again have to mention my son, 6 years old son, who's playing with pretty good level on, for example, chess.com or Elite Chess around 1500, and most of his games he plays FIDE lever. Ever since I taught him FIDE lever, he won like so many games. His opponents are so annoyed that I actually tend to play anti-FIDE lever. That is going to be subject of our lessons in one of the next video lectures. So knight g5. Obviously we threaten to play knight takes f7, doing the fork on queen and the rook. And when you take a look, when you take a brief look at an opening like this, you just realize, well, I can defend this pawn on f7, but to play d5. Those who know a little bit of a theory, they can try two tricks. You know that I have the video that is very popular in this channel. It's called Traxler Counter-Gambit. Traxler Counter-Gambit is bishop c5. It's pretty fine. It's very interesting, and it's full of tricks, especially if white doesn't know how to trade it. Since my job is to show you and to teach you how are you supposed to play, let me just show you what are you supposed to do in these positions. I like two options. The main one, and the easiest one for all of you, is just don't play knight takes f7. Just don't do that, because then you go into the world of the Traxler Counter-Gambit, like sacrifices, tricks, and everything else that begins with bishop f2. I constantly keep questioning by one guy who sent me, like, I believe 3 messages. Maya, what are we supposed to do if they put the king on f1 and if simply white doesn't take because of knight a4 and so on? Don't play like this with the white pieces. It's so dangerous. So you definitely, after bishop c5, should play bishop takes f7, which is absolutely the best. And I believe I just found a way for the easiest possible developing for white, where you would be able to retain the pawn up and absolutely stop their counter attack and initiative on the king side. I gotta be honest by myself, when I played some bullet games in the past, I rarely played bishop c4 on high level, but when I do, people like to go with the Traxler Counter-Gambit. When I play bishop f7, they gotta go with king e7. Simply king e7 is way better than king f8, because king e7 keeps an option of both h6 to win the knight or bishop on f7. And now when you bring your bishop back to b3, which is like very important, and I would say special move here, because now you really threaten fork with the knight f7. Now, unlike when the king is on f8, they have an option of bringing this rook to f8. Bringing the rook to f8, they just take control of the f-file. They all of a sudden threaten bishop takes f2 followed by knight e4. They will have d6 followed by bishop g4. Quite a powerful idea by black, and they also have queen e8 followed by queen g6. When I put all these arrows like this, oh my god, it looks like we're about to resign the game with the white pieces. Don't panic. Don't worry, I'm gonna show you a very simple plan for white. You play castle because, first of all, you put your king in a safety. You prevent bishop f2 by black, which was threatened right now when the rook was on f8. And basically, it is the most normal and I would even say the only move in this position. When you play castles, they have to play d6. d6 opens up the bishop, and they threaten bishop g4. Bishop g4 is a very annoying threat in all these type of games. Bishop g4 is especially good when the bishop stands on c5. And then when they play bishop g4, we can never kick it away with f3 because the king on g1 will be pinned. So we would have to play queen e1, then they jump knight e4, and they have like a bunch of sacrifices, knight e4, knight f3, queen e8, queen h5, or queen g6, and it's just a messy game where usually black will have some decisive attacking chances. Just because of this, let me show you absolutely the easiest plan for white, with which I guarantee you're gonna win all your games with the white pieces. You play d3. And when you play d3, you just want to oppose this bishop with the bishop e3. And when they play h6, bring the why, because simply they want to bring this knight back, and they have bishop g4. Oh my goodness, look at this. The rook is on f5, the bishop is on g4, they threaten knight e4. This almost looks lost for white, unless we had something. And of course, we do have. So we play bishop to e3. This is the last move before you do. First of all, you develop one more piece, you oppose the strong bishop on c5, and most importantly, you allow yourself knight bd2 to develop last minor piece to overprotect on f3. You control the d4, and they absolutely have no more attack. I don't want to discuss about this position anymore. White just looks so much better. Why? Because they don't have an attack. And a second thing, simply, we just completed development. Oof, I feel like I'm doing a lecture with one of my students when I start yelling like crazy. So just to know, if I ever start coaching you, don't get surprised, because I like to yell when I do my coaching. So you just play bishop e3 followed by knight bd2. White retained the pawn up. White completed his development. He's gonna play flexible c3 to keep the light square bishop, or not like in Ray Lopez. You will exchange the dark square bishops. Knight bd2 just overprotects the knight on f3, which means the rook on f8 and the bishop on g4, even with the queen e8, queen h5, is not gonna bring them anything. White is absolutely fine. Okay. The existing position requires some defensive skills afterwards, a little bit more, but generally speaking, what is just much better, check on your engines. Apart from Traxler Counter-Gambit and the best line with the bishop f7, there is also anti-Traxler Counter-Gambit that I want to show you here, or Counter-Gambit on Traxler Counter-Gambit. It's the d4 line. That's what I played in a couple of my games. There is a very interesting idea behind this one, because you know that the Traxler Counter-Gambit main idea is that after knight f7, bishop f2, king f2, knight e4, king g1, queen h4, g3, knight g3, and now this queen threatens the bishop, but in some lines, for example, if the king goes on e3, you have queen h4, g3, this, and when they take, you have this check without taking the bishop, and this check is giving like white black such a nice tricky ideas, and they're about to fall apart in many of these lines. Just because of this, I want to show you why do I suggest the d4 if you don't like bishop f7, which is my suggestion always. d4 is interesting because when they take by bishop, by the way, that's bad. Now you can easily take by knight. And now the same thing and the same approach from the Traxler Counter-Gambit doesn't seem to be working. I play g3, you take, I take. Sorry, sweetheart. But if you wanna now play queen d4, now my queen is just holding because there is no more pawn on d4, and that's just winning. And that's why after d4, they can't even also take by knight because you play knight f7. They have to play d5. Who's gonna play d5? Only good players. Only good players who know some theory. Then you take by bishop. They take. You take the pawn. Take the bishop on c5. You play a3, and eventually you remain with a pawn up. You will just play like a normal game. This is like middle game, queenless middle game, where white absolutely doesn't have any problems and is a pawn up. let's go to fried liver. Before I show you knight g5 and the main line with the d5, I have to show you the line that happened in games of my son a couple of times. People like to play this one because you simply cannot take like this, because they can play queen h4, and if g3, because you were threatening mate on f2, then knight g3, and you have to take by pawn, and then they can play queen like this, knight takes like this, then they play d5, and they have like some crazy initiative, even being down a rook, or they can simply play like queen f6, threatening mate, or even some d5 craziness, and so many other things. Simple. Let's make the long story short. When they play knight e4, it's bad because you take by bishop. So let's put it this way: whether they play Traxler Counter-Gambit or knight takes e4, always take by bishop. And now in Traxler, you bring the bishop back, but here knight on g5 is hanging. If you move the knight or if you take on e4, they will take the bishop. Then you just play d4. That's an important thing. That's an important line. I taught my son to play d3 to attack this knight, and lots of his opponents take on g5, and then you win the queen. But okay, this is more like Patzer's trick. You just have to play d4. You just open up the center. Now you threaten this knight on e4, but at the same time you also defend the knight on g5. They can't touch the knight because of g5, and the queen on d8 would be fallen. They have to play something like h6. You take the knight, you kick the knight away, c3, queen d3, knight bd2, followed by castles and f4, and being like first of all ahead in development, having like a better placement of your piece, safer king, that just favors white in this position. Time for the fried liver attack. After knight g5, they gotta go with d5. When they play d5, you gotta take. The point of this lecture is not to teach you the main lines, because first of all, not all of you play against IMs and GMs all the time. Against like theoretical experts all the time, so you guys play against weaker guys, and it's time for you to show you what happens on the most common mistakes by beginners. Knight takes d5. So this is actually the point of the fried liver attack, and this is what all of you should like so much, and you definitely should apply this in your games. So let's get started. After knight takes d5, watch out, lots of guys, you guys learn that you should sack this knight on f7, and reminds me on a Backhouse chess when you sack this knight on f7 to start forcing the black's king to walk around. But before that, don't forget that the knight is hanging. So that's one more reason for playing knight takes f7. They gotta take, because there is a fork. They gotta take. You play queen f3. When you play queen f3, they have to play king e6, because queen f3 is check. And after you came up with this check, you threaten the knight on d5 and the king on f7. They have to play king e6. If they don't play king e6, for example, you have like a couple of tactical puzzles. I've seen that on lower levels. When the king goes on g8, make a move for white. You can mate them whether you capture by queen or by bishop. So for like better pleasure, I just suggest you to take by queen and eventually mate your opponent with the bishop on g8. If the king goes on e8, because they realize they went absolutely wrong, take by bishop, because taking by bishop still threatens checkmate and still threatens to take this knight on c6. They gotta go with the queen on d7, and then remember, one of my students played a game with the black pieces like this. He blundered this. He didn't know the line. After that, we learned everything. But he won the game because this guy didn't recognize the threat by black that was knight d4, kicking and removing the knight away from defending the bishop on d5. That's why you have to play c3 to prevent knight jumps to d4. And c3 prevents knight jumps to d4, and white is just completely winning. So this is the only trick you gotta remember. You're already up a pawn. Don't forget, even though it looks like nothing has changed in black's position, don't forget they moved the king, which means that they won't be able to castle, and your position is just so much better. After queen f3, they gotta go king e6. Please, just remember the following 3 moves. Nothing else, and you will win all your games. I wouldn't be so sure that like 70%, not 70, 75, 80% of your games with the white pieces, for example, from level from 1900 to 1600, for example, maybe 1500, 75 to 80% you're going to play FIDE lever. Actually, when you play e4, they will most likely play e5. And then you play knight f3, and then they play some weird openings, elephant gambit, Latvian. But most common move is knight c6, because they all know, develop the knight, defend the pawn, and that's it. And then you go with the FIDE lever. And that's why I insist on this opening so much, and it's so good to know, and to know these tricks. So you play knight c3 to attack this knight on d5. They gotta defend it with a knight c on e7. Shearer once played a game where his opponent played like this. You can play a3, you can play short castle, you can play bishop e3. Every single move, even though you're down a piece, is enough for a huge and almost decisive initiative for white. They gotta go with knight c on e7. Most logical and most defensive idea. You go, very important move to remember, very important, because you're down a piece and you gotta act very aggressively. It's d4. You open up this bishop, you attack the center, and you basically take advantage of the fact that the king remains weak in the center on e6. When you play d4, they gotta maintain this knight on d5 in the center with c6. If they take on d4, dum da da dum dum, boom. His Majesty Bishop G5 wins the game here. You sacrifice second piece, and this is one of those moments. Don't bother to, look at the endgames, read the books. Just check out this video and absolutely be sure what are you supposed to do from now for the next 15 years. Why? Because this is simply the refutation. Look at this. You pin the knight, and king remains weak in the center. When they take second piece, oh my god, we're just down 2 pieces. Who cares about that? Who cares if you're down like 2 pieces? Just mate the king and fight against it. So play long castles. Lots of guys, instead of playing c6, where you of course will play rook h3-1, will include this c takes b2, like let me put white's king into the center. Of course, you're not gonna fall for that. You're gonna put your king on b1 and say amen. Don't you dare to think that I'm such a big patzer to take by my king on b2. So you play king on b1, and now you're even protected by his stupid pawn on b2. So when he plays c6, trying to maintain the material advantage because they're just up 2 pieces. Look at this, like being up 2 pieces is like on paper completely winning for black. Of course it's not. Rook h3-1, and I insist on this one. Active bishop, active rooks on only open 2 open files, E and D files, active queen, weak king, pinned knight, pinned queen. So when they play king d7, which is practically the only move, take on d5, rook takes d5, they can't take by knight because you take the queen, and send this guy home, and you know what I usually like to say. Greetings for you, my friend, but switch this game for something else. So, after like e takes d5, we've just learned that they're not supposed to take by knight. Once again, you take on f7, you give check, you develop knight c3 threatening this knight, they gotta go knight c on e7, you play d4, and when they play the best, objectively the best move, play c6, you just played the most logical move, d takes c5. I have to tell you something. First of all, we already have like enough in terms of compensation. Engine would give you like +2 for white, which means like almost completely winning. I would say white is much better because even on my level, it requires some, let's just say, precise moves in order to win this game. But speaking from logical point of view, I'm going to play bishop g5 to pin the knight on e7 and knight on d5. You should never forget that the king on e6 remains weak for the rest of the game. I'll play bishop g5 long castles, and at some point I'm just gonna take this knight on e7 to weaken knight on d5, and they will just fall apart. Just because of this, after e takes d5, they have to play knight a5, which goes into the main line that I'm about to do in one of the next lectures for white. At the moment, I'm just going to show you the main stuff. Apart from knight a5, they can play surprising b5, which shouldn't be that surprising for you, because if you take on b5, they want to take on d5, threatening this bishop, defending the knight, and threatening the pawn on g2. That's why on b5, the best move is bishop f1. That's the best move, and this is what you need to remember, because now they can't take by queen, because now g2 is defended, and now you attack both queen and the pawn. So they have to play like knight e4, and now this is the pure theory. After knight e4, you play c3, kicking this knight away and weakening the b5. They take by knight, threatening this knight. You take here, they take here. You give check, they go here. You go queen f3, threatening and pinning this, or just go castles. I mean, it doesn't even matter. Whatever you do, I even forgot the most precise and accurate order moves. Queen f3, and when they play like bishop e7, watch out, they can't move this knight anywhere. You play castles. When they play like rook to b8, I believe that the main line in theory goes with d takes e5, and d takes e5, and now they just have to go with knight e3, because they open up this bishop, open queen, threaten mate. I'm just trying to remember, that's why I'm a little bit slower here. You play queen h3, threatening mate on d7, that's the main line. They gotta take on d2, otherwise the knight is fallen. You take. They can't take by bishop because this knight and bishop would be falling. They take by knight. You go d4, I believe, and they just go like this. You give check and don't even worry, because they were threatening knight f3. You play knight c3, defending this one. You're up a pawn and you should be winning. I just showed you briefly this line because in one of the next lectures I'm going to show you what to do. Also, they can play knight d4 immediately in this position. No big deal about knight d4 as well. You just play c3, they play b5, you just bring the bishop back on f5, they play knight d5, and boom, there we go, we have the same line. So all things considered, knight d5 is going to be happening in most of your games. People don't know about b5 and knight d4, especially on some, I don't know, from 1000 to 1700 levels. And higher rated opponents, those who know some theory, they know for the typical fried liver trick with the knight f7, and they will go with the knight a5. Knight a5 threatens the bishop, and they want to take the on d5 either by knight or queen. You have to give check, and they gotta play c6. I'm just gonna show you like a couple more moves in order to know what to do. I'll show you the game of Morozevich and Kasparov, just to make sure what are you supposed to play, and that even these top world-class guys in the past played this opening with white pieces. They didn't fear black's compensation, and they won their games. I usually say, A, are we up a pawn? A, if they play bishop d7, are we supposed to exchange? A, don't forget, yes, we do want to exchange, but we do want to exchange in the way we're happy with. So basically, don't immediately play bishop d7 and help their development. Play queen e2. Queen e2 defends your bishop, helps your development, and at the same time attacks the pawn on e5. They can't take on b5 because queen b5 would be winning. Simply, I even remember my son won 2 games with a queen b5 threatening king and queen. King and knight. They have to play c6, you take. If they take by knight, you just take on b7, and now you threaten mate on f7 and the knight. And if they take by pawn, you just take on e5, and now you're not up. You're not up a pawn. You're up 2 pawns. So don't forget, on bishop d7, we do want to exchange, but in our favor after queen e2. Finally, after c6, d takes, b takes. Here, white has 2 possibilities, 2 reliable and good possibilities. The one that Nakamura used in US Championship, and the one that according to the engines is considered to be the most solid for white. It's bishop to d3, followed by knight jumps to e4, which doesn't happen in the line that I want to show you, and that I like actually to teach my students. It's the bringing bishop back to e2 and completing development with d3 afterwards. You remain up a pawn. They gotta kick your knight away. You play knight f3, e4. Of course, that's the only way, otherwise you will play d3, knight c3, or d4. So they play e4, knight e5. They have 2 options. They can play bishop d6 or queen d4. Please don't apologize if I talk too fast. I actually tried to solve this problem for you, like speaking, like slower in the past, but then I said, wait a sec, these guys are actually asking me to not to talk fast, and they can actually pause the videos. So if you want to review some lines, just pause the video and check it out a couple of times, or just stop there or slow it down. But basically, don't ask me to slow down my way of discussing, talking, and explaining. So after knight e5, they can play bishop d6 or queen d4. Bishop d6 is the main line. Queen d4 is tricky because knight threatens. You can't play knight g4, by the way, because if you play knight g4, they can play bishop g4, and e3, which would weaken on f2, and bishop is hanging, and that would be winning for black. But then you play f4. F4 to maintain control and the defense of the knight. If they take en passant, you just take by knight, and next move will be d4. You're clearly better because you remained up a pawn, and you will play d4 in the center. When they play queen d4, f4, people tend to play bishop c5, and I'll show you like 6 tournament wins of my students. They just play rook f1. None of their opponents feel the danger. And actually, none of their opponents felt the danger because they all fell for the following trick. With the rook f1, you don't only stop the checkmate by black, but you basically threaten c3 followed by b4, a very cheap and kind of obvious fork. So most of these guys play, not most of these, all opponents of my students, even 1900, blunder this. And after c3, b4, fork, and pack your stuff and go home. That's why they gotta move the queen or bishop. Best move is moving the bishop away. c3, d4, and you don't have to panic anymore. You just completed your development. You remained up a pawn, and they even have the broken pawn structure, what is so much better. Finally, after knight e5, bishop d6, don't ever move the knight. Just keep on developing yourself. Consider my rule, CAD, centralization, activity development, in its full use. So play d4. Why? Because you maintain control of the knight on e5 in the center. And when they take en passant, you take by knight, because knight was hanging. You take by knight, and they play queen c7. That's the only move to stop castle, because h2 is hanging. If they play castle, of course you would make castle, and you're just so much better because you're up a pawn and they don't have any compensation. But when they play queen c7, they create a battery. They prevent castle because h2 is hanging. So when you play like b3, this is an important move, and this is the move I insist so much. First of all, it excludes the possibility of this knight coming back into the game via c4. Second thing, it gives us bishop b2, and it gives us an absolutely nice idea of deploying our pieces and developing this dark square bishop. I guess 99% of you wouldn't develop this bishop on this diagonal. You would probably play bishop e3, or some of you would even play g3 followed by bishop f4. No, b3 was move played by Kasparov and Morozovich. After castles, bishop b2, knight e4, you just have to prevent this pawn hanging on h2, and you play knight c3, challenging this knight, and of course sending a clear message to your opponent like, hey man, let's exchange pieces because I'm up a pawn. So after f5, you play h3 so you can finally do the castles. In a couple of games that I found, people played like rook d8, rook e8, but then you just play queen e1 followed by rook to d1, and you're up a pawn after all. I'm not saying that black doesn't have an interesting game. I'm not saying that black should be considered absolutely bad just because they're down a pawn. No, they have certain dose of compensation. But you know what? I would like to be Machiavellist at this point. We're at least one up a pawn, and we also completed our development without any structural weaknesses. Hope you enjoyed in the fried liver attack. Thank you all for watching, and see you very soon. Thanks so much for your donations. We appreciate it so much, and I can just make conclusion that this channel is just growing in the best possible way, and I'm so proud of this. Thank you guys, and see you next time. Bye bye.